this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
Body Bags with Joseph Scott Moore. You know, it's said that you need a plan. You need a plan if you are going to meet with success in any endeavor. Now, most of the time we would think that, you begin to think about a plan as something that has a level of positivity to it. You're going to set a goal, right? And step by step, you're going to make your way through it methodically. Make sure that you cover all of your bases, that everything you do, every step you take, every phone call you make is going to bring you to that point of what you define as success. Here's the question, though. Can the same thing, as far as making a plan, apply to pure evil? I submit to you that it can. And I got to say, friends, back in November of 2022, matter of fact, November 13th, there was a plan put in place. And the end game seems to have been homicide. It seems as though it was successful. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags. Well, Dave, the case that won't go away, the cases that continue to capture the imagination of the public, and I think probably the media, that I don't know that I see an end in sight relative to pushing out information regarding the Idaho 4, so-called Idaho 4.
This was not in our game plan. It was not.
It wasn't. Remember, I think I wouldn't say it's a solemn vow, but I know off air, because we did several episodes, said I was not going to do it again.
Right.
But we've had a convergence of a couple of things that have occurred, I guess, within the past week. First, we had this horrific photo dump.
Oh, my gosh.
That came about as a result, apparently, of, let's see, how can I frame this? It came as a result of some Einstein with the state constabulary in Idaho that, for whatever reason, posted nearly 3,000 images. And, of course, they quickly took them down.
But there's nothing that's ever taken down from the internet. Once it's up, it's done. That's what we tell children as they're in junior high, little girls in particular. Whatever you do now will last for the rest of your life. So stop it.
Yeah, and don't do it.
I will tell you this, though, Joe, when those pictures came out, you know, you and I both were called to be on shows of discussion of Kohberger and the murders. And it was one of these episodes that we did with Nancy Grace on Crime Stories. And I was on the phone with Nancy about it because we were discussing a couple of other things for the show the next morning. But I could tell there was something else there. And it was the same thing that was there with you. Why are these pictures out there for all the world to see? This only causes pain for the friends and family. I mean, the loved ones have been through enough. Okay, let's just move our lives forward and stop this madness. But I will tell you, there's money in ratings. There's money in hits. There's money in these things. And as long as people want to hear about Kohberger, it's not that dissimilar from Manson in the 70s. If you remember, for years after the Manson trials were over, we still to this day have Manson stuff.
But what's his name? Vincent
Bugliosi.
Bugliosi. You know, he bit
helter skelter.
Yeah, he beat that dead horse as long as he possibly could.
Lost all credibility with me when he said there was only one shooter in Dealey Plaza.
I know. And suddenly he's Give him an inch, take a mile, give him a rope, cowboy.
Oh my gosh!
Look, that's not to my credit. That's Eddie Murphy. Okay, so
back to Kohberger. Sorry.
Yeah, when this occurred, I was at work, and I'm talking about the photo dump, and all of us at Jacksonville State University that work in the forensics department are either current or former practitioners. And when I say that, we've got a wide array of people that have worked in a variety of different jurisdictions. I've got one colleague that's a former Boston area police officer and detective who I just treasure, and people that have worked for state police agencies. Everybody to a person on our staff has worked homicide cases. And I did kind of an informal poll with them, Dave. And I said, let me ask you something. To the best of your recollection, do you ever recall having put the bracelets on a perpetrator, put together a case file, took said case file to the DA, prosecutor true bills this thing with grand jury, you get an indictment, you go through all the pretrial prep, you take them to court, you try them, and they're adjudicated guilty, and they are peddled off to the state penitentiary for homicide. To the best of your recollection, did any of the departments you were affiliated with continue to release information regarding a case of a homicide? And to a person, Dave, they said no. Now, I know what people are thinking. Well, there's stuff that's leaked all the time. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about an official release of data in the wake of a conviction. I don't understand what purpose it serves. I really don't. And there's been so much about these cases, Dave, that I have not understood. And look, I'm not directing the totality of that comment toward Kohberger's team.
Right.
This cuts both ways. There were so many things that were done relative to how the whole case was handled. And I know that there's a lot of stuff that we didn't see that went on behind the scenes. I'll give you that. But, just some of the initial handling of the case and kind of how some of the authorities involved in this thing have worked it. I don't know. I'm using in my lexicon now, I'm using the term foreshadowing a lot. And I'm really wondering those early signs that we saw of this case being handled, air quotes. I wonder if that's a foreshadowing of what we're seeing right now. You begin to tear up the steel ball in the beginning, which seems like it would be impossible. But yet here you go, you're continuing to do it. And I got to tell you, Dave, there's one thing that really just eats in my brain in this thing is there going to be a misstep in this thing? Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden there's going to be a problem with post-conviction appeals now.
Which, by the way, as part of his conditions of his plea deal, he was not allowed to appeal anything. However, we all know that's not worth anything. But Joe, to back up and look at where we are today, the reason for looking at Kohberger's case today is because there have been new allegations that, one, did Brian Kohberger have help in the murders? And right before we started taping, was there a second weapon used in the murders? And I will tell you this. I went back to my notes to find where we talked about the possibility of a second weapon
Yeah.
And I want you to re-explain what it is and why, because I know you can. First of all, the whole idea of two weapons being used and one guy. Well, if there's two weapons and there's two guys, then maybe you got something. So as we begin to really break this down, not knowing how far afield this is going to go, because every time I think we're done, there's something new that falls. But starting with the case and just the facts, not the ideas that are being spun in true crime chat rooms by people who are really good at reading books written by Ann Rule, and they become a couch detective,
Yeah.
Let's just look at the facts. We know for a fact, because we know Brian Kohberger said he did this. We know that he has admitted to this, and you and I have seen plenty of evidence of him in his vehicle arriving on the scene. Am I right there, Joe? Him in his white Elantra?
Yeah, because again, that was early on. These dumps that were that I was just the aforementioned, dumps. There was the video dump that came out famously when at that moment in time we had another view that we had never seen, right? And the speeding up, the speeding away, continuing to kind of orbit the location. And I got to tell you, putting aside what was found inside of that King Road address, it appeared at that moment in time rather damning. And it doesn't matter if it's damning to me at all. I mean, I'm not the one that's investigating, and certainly not the one that prosecuted the case. But for whatever reason, the police, I think, felt that video evidence was rather compelling. And I got to tell you, it would seem as though the totality of the evidence that the police had collected and processed, guess who else felt like it was rather compelling? Kohberger's team. Because, they are the people that are advising him. But what we do know is that on that fateful night, or early morning hours, it's dark outside, someone entered that residence. Now, there are people out there saying right now that more than one person entered that residence, and there was admittedly a horrific crime that was committed. Police along the way and investigators that are involved in this case have felt as though that both of the young women upstairs were killed first. And I don't have a quarrel with that on any level, because whoever entered that house had surveilled that house. They knew about it. They knew points of access to that house. They had surveilled it. There was a perfect perch up behind the house, Dave, where you could look down and see. And that night when you see that car orbiting around that area, it's not the first time.
Right.
It's not the first time. And as a matter of fact, I don't think that that they were merely surveilled at their house. I think that they were probably seen in other locations and surveilled there as well. So someone's going to know, and someone is going to feel very, very comfortable about entering this house, and it's public knowledge that slider, the sliding door on the rear, was left unsecured, right? And so it would be very, very easy to get in and out of that residence in order to facilitate, this horror. You think about the two women upstairs that are brutalized, and we'll get into that again when we talk about the two weapons here in a moment, or the two weapon theory. They're brutalized up on that floor, but Dave, they're contained. They're co-sleeping, right? They're co-sleeping. They're in a contained area. And here's one thing that we still don't know. I, to this date, have yet to see a toxicology report. on any of the victims that are involved in this. As a matter of fact, the so-called autopsy reports that were released this past week, they're not full autopsy reports because
what's missing?
A lot of the narrative, I didn't see anything like organ weights and measurements and, all those sorts of things. We just essentially got this kind of blast that went out to this point. It was selective, I think. Kohberger's team would have seen it. They would have seen every dirty detail in that because that's part of discovery. They're going to have that. Oh, by the way, they're also going to have tox. They'll know what the tox was on each victim in this house, Dave.
And we don't have that tox screen yet.
No, I haven't seen it. I've asked around, I've searched, and there's a lot of speculative stuff that's out there. I've heard all kinds of things mentioned. You'd be surprised. Yeah. But yet there it is, and it floats about. And you can speculate all you want, but it's hard to argue when you get those hard numbers in about what the blood alcohol level was like, whatever other kind of substances may have been on board, Dave. But, after this is perpetrated upstairs, and we're talking, this is after 4 a.m., this individual that committed this crime or crimes makes their way down the staircase. Now, I still hold to the idea that on some level, Xana had an awareness. We know that she had been up, right? What do you think about that? What's your thoughts about Xana?
I believe, based on really more than anything else, Dylan Mortensen, what Dylan Mortensen told police on the body cam footage, Dylan being one of the other roommates downstairs. There were 2 roommates that were not killed. Of the 4 other people, there were 6 people in the house. Dylan Mortensen is the one who saw Kohberger and gave the bushy eyebrow description. But Dylan Mortensen said that she heard, and she wrongly in the moment said she thought it was Kaylee or Maddie, but it was Xana who was up because Kaylee and Maddie were on the top floor in the bedroom. Xana had gone up the stairs, I think, because she heard a ruckus going on. The same ruckus that Dylan Mortensen thought was Maddie playing with the dog. Xana went up to check it out because it was right above her room and gets halfway up the stairs and realizes there's a man in the house and says something to that effect loud enough for Dylan to hear. There's a man in the house. She then, I believe, tries to get back to safety of some type, and Kohberger attacks. Catches up to her at the bottom of the stairs. She gets to her room where, based on the pictures that we did see, Joe, a horrific battle took place.
Yeah.
And I believe Xana Kernodle put up the fight of her life and probably wore Kohberger out.
Well, and I think that when that subject, that person, that individual was finally in her bedroom at that moment in time, he's already spent.
Yeah.
I was on air with both my buddy Vinny Politan and also Jesse Weber, who, by the way, shout out to Jesse. Jesse's got a brand new show on News Nation, and it drops every evening at 11 p.m. I highly recommend you watch Jesse's show. I've been working with him for years. And, we talked about the injuries relative to these blurbs, autopsy blurbs that were sent out. And Dave, we're talking a total of 160 injuries that this thing details. So, I think that by the time he would have gotten down to Xana's bedroom, he is spent, but you're going to have another adrenaline dump with him because, at this moment in time, people are saying, well, how in the world could one person have done this? Well, I'll go through all of that in just a moment, but I got to tell you, just on the surface of it, Xana, heroically, by the way, she was the one individual that was impeding him from exiting that house. And she got the worst of it. I mean, she really did, Dave. I mean, just absolutely brutalized. It appears that Ethan never got up out of that bed. Now, why he didn't, I have no idea. I don't know. I think that the idea that he's laying there, goes to a broader conversation relative to toxicology and those sorts of things, because he's a robust young man. He never got up out of that bed, at least from what we're hearing at this moment. But, when it's all said and done, the perpetrator in this crime stabbed, cut, and beat the life out of each of these 4 young people. And apparently there was a plan, and it came off like gangbusters as far as the perpetrator was concerned. I know I've had this conversation before, Dave, and it bears repeating. Kimmy, when I was first covering this case, and the intensity had, just picked up, particularly in light of the finding the sheath, she in her own way decided she's like, my husband's got to have this knife. And as a surprise present, Amazon delivers one to my house, and I wanted you to have this so that you can use it, on air and for demonstration purposes. And for me, it was really important. I credit my wife here. She kind of understood it. It was really important for me to hold this weapon, and it is a weapon. Okay. Make no mistake about it. This knife, this KBAR knife, was designed for war. All right. There are all manner of different types of knives that are out there. I mentioned this, I think when I was on with Jesse the other day, Dave, we're just coming off, I guess it was a month ago that Nick Reiner, has been accused of brutalizing both of his parents in their bedroom, coming in. And I've heard just kind of snatches along the way that it may have been some type of butcher knife that was retrieved from the kitchen. Don't confuse the knife that may have been used in that case with a KBAR. Marines have utilized this knife not just to kill, but it's a utility knife in the sense that on those horrible desert islands that they were in South Pacific, they were opening up crates of ammunition. They were hammering crates of ammunition. They were stringing up laundry with these things to dry their clothes. It had multiple usages, but the main purpose of this thing, which, by the way, actually has a blood groove cut into it.
What does that actually mean,
Joe? It's a channel on the sides of it, and they refer to it as a blood groove. You see it with military knives in particular, and it facilitates this thing passing easily through tissue. Okay. And it pushes the weight out to the perimeter of this thing. Now, this knife weighs about it's 0.7 pounds, so it's almost a pound. All right. Wow. The blade itself is just over 7 inches in length. So when you think about maximum penetration with this thing, you've got the weight of this knife being driven down, and that kinetic transfer into the body, into any body with this thing, is going to do a lot of damage. But it's got multiple utilities, Dave. And this article that came out in People magazine I wanted to address this because that in the last couple of days is what I've been asked about over and over again. The knife has, in one part of this article, this expert that was hired by the defense team had put forth his opinion in regards to this, that there were more than one weapon involved. I could see how somebody could maybe come to that conclusion. Okay. However, unlike other knives, the KBAR in particular, like I said, has multiple utility. You can flip this thing around so that the butt end of it is facing downward. And I urge anybody, just go look at the pictures that are on the internet of this thing. If you'll look down the long axis at the butt end, it looks like a hammerhead. And it's that heavy, so that if you're wielding this thing and you're holding it, let's say, in an inverted position, and you're driving it down over and over again, they talked about the extensive injuries to Kaylee in particular, where her face is literally crushed. You're not capable, or they're not capable of actually stating how many wounds were specifically involving her face. And that's because you've got cross communication of these insults. A lot of these things are lacerations. They're not like edge weapon cuts. So this thing is being driven into her face. I think there's a pattern abrasion that maybe it was her or Maddie, I can't recall, but there's a pattern abrasion that's, I think, on
that was
the chin.
Kaylee. It was on Kaylee, yeah.
So it's Kaylee. The question is, we don't know what most of the time with a complete autopsy report, what you will see from the pathologist is they will render an opinion about what type of instrument could have generated this. Okay. We're not seeing that at this point in time because the door's been shut on that and will remain shut for the foreseeable future, kind of like with toxicology. All right. Now, listen, if it's proven that there were two weapons involved in this, Godspeed. I'm happy for you. But to this point, that has never entered into the conversation as far as the investigators were concerned. They have solely been focused on the KBAR knife that should have been in that sheath. And of course, it's never been found. So it would be very difficult to do an analysis of this, because one of the things I was really fascinated about relative to the knife, Dave, and I'd said this early on, just imagine that, what we've stated earlier, that Kohberger starting out on the top floor, and notice I'm saying his name. I said I would not say his name anymore, but we have to for these purposes. With Kohberger starting out on the top floor, this knife is pristine when he shows up there, okay? So he's got both Kaylee and Maddie cornered in this bed, and every time he strikes one and he gets blood on this knife from one victim, he then kind of inoculates the body of the other victim with the blood from the first victim. And this kind of goes back and forth and back and forth. So if it had stopped right there and you recovered the knife, whose blood would you have found on it? Well, only Maddie and Kaylee's, right? Mm-hmm. But keep in mind, we don't have the knife. As he makes his way down, now you're going to have transfer of blood that will go from those two victims upstairs to both Xana and Ethan downstairs. And you will get this constant commingling that goes on. But we don't have the knife. Unless somebody recovers that knife, and I would think that by the time they could recover it, wherever it is, the sample might be degraded, or you might be able to get something. I don't know how well it was cleaned before it was disposed of. It has been disposed of somewhere. And out there, Dave, in this area, there's a whole lot of places to dispose of a knife that you'll never find. All right. I don't think that it holds water that two weapons were used, because the next idea here is that it's not just two weapons, it's two people. And the reason this is being said is that the expert is holding that it is impossible for the accused, Kohberger, who he was part of the team representing Kohberger. It is impossible that in this 15-minute window, roughly is what we're talking about here, that he could have gone upstairs, killed both of these young women, and then gone downstairs, met up with Xana, began assaulting her, and kills Ethan in addition, after she's retreated into the room. I don't think that that's an impossibility. I really don't, because I think that it would be possible for one single individual to perpetrate all four of these homicides, particularly, when you consider that there was a plan. One of the very interesting components to all of this that the expert that was hired by Kohberger's team had put forward is that there was an attempt to clean up, and there was like an absence of footprints, bloody footprints throughout the house. I got to tell you, if someone is taking care, you're not necessarily going to harvest bloody footprints in every single case, particularly if you've got a case of containment. One thing that I find interesting about this case, we go back upstairs to Kaylee and Maddie's bedroom, is that, what did I say? That is that spot adjacent to that bed and on that bed, that's where it happens. Now, I can tell you this, guess where I think there would have been a lot of blood? On his person. I have never left that behind, and I always retreat back to the evidence that that prosecution stated that they had relative to this Dickies jumpsuit. Again, a plan, right? Mm-hmm. So you've got a set of coveralls on, and I think that there's a chance that it could have been super saturated. You've got an individual that is probably gloved, okay? Because that is what you would do if you're planning. And particularly if you'd even worked a mock crime scene as an undergraduate candidate, or maybe even a master's degree candidate at your old alma mater. And so is it possible that he could have gotten out of the house? First off, let's just say that he's gloved, his hands are gloved. They say, well, what happened to the gloves? I'll tell you exactly what happened to the gloves. They went into his pockets of the coveralls. And if you've never seen a pair of these Dickies coveralls, they're huge and they have deep pockets. Do you know why they have deep pockets? Because they're used for people to work in. So you put things, nuts, screws, you can put a hammer in your pocket if you want to. You can have just about anything on your person, but there's covering that's going on. Now, what kind of coverings would there have been for the shoes? Well, we think about, I don't know, is it possible to go out and get surgical shoe covers for your feet? Yeah, absolutely. You can buy them on Amazon. That's no big deal. You could pick them up somewhere. You could walk in and pay cash for them at a medical supply store, because there's a lot of home health care people. You walk in and you buy surgical coverings for shoes. Nobody's going to think about it. My mother's sick at home. I want to cover my shoes. I want to cover my feet. Or maybe if he had access to crime scene processing supplies, like at his old university, and he had grabbed a handful of these things, he's going to have them forever and ever. Amen. And that's untraceable. I could have kids that walk out of my classrooms with stuff, and I have a crime scene house. I'm not saying that my kids are lifting anything, but you understand, this is not real difficult to do in order to facilitate. The other part to this that the expert had mentioned is that there was evidence of an attempt at a cleanup at the scene. And so, ergo, that's evidence that two people were involved, which I don't know how that comes about because, Dave, I saw the images of the house. I know you saw the images of the house, of the interior of the house. Dave, that house was not cleaned up. There was blood everywhere. There was blood on multiple surfaces.
I was shocked at the amount of blood that as a matter of fact, it's why I felt strongly about not putting it on the air. I felt like what I saw shocked me and pretty unshockable. So all I could think of was the poor parents. That's all I keep thinking about is the parents. And why? Why would they have to see this? But now that we have seen it, Joe, not only was it not cleaned up, there was no effort to clean it up. Nothing.
No, there's not. And, one of the things that happens when and this comes from long years of work in the morgue too.
Yeah, I bet.
Which is a very bloody environment. Okay. Now, I have worked in the morgue, spilled quite a bit of blood in the morgue. And when I say spilled, I mean opened up a body cavity and had blood drip down onto the floor. Guess what I do to not get blood on my shoes? And I wear shoe covers. I don't step in it. So if you're planned and you have an awareness of where blood might be deposited, you're not going to step in it and track it through. I mean, look, everybody wants to prattle on and on about how this guy was a forensics expert. He knew. Okay, well, let's follow that line of logic. I don't think he's a forensics expert, but if he is exposed to just enough of it, he's going to know that one of the base elements is that you don't step in the blood. All right. Because it'll transfer onto you. But the expert goes to say that it appeared that some of the blood that was left behind was diluted with what he believes some kind of solution, implying, I think, cleaning solution. Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, I'm glad that he brought it seriously. In all seriousness, I'm glad that he brought it up. Okay. Because I think that the more voices you have involved in this and it can talk about it, let's come and reason together. Mm-hmm. All right. And let's have a conversation about it. But if you see blood that appears to be diluted, how are you defining diluted? Because blood can take on a certain appearance just over a period of time. And we've talked about this where the serum begins to separate from the red blood cells. And you can look at a droplet of blood many times, and one end of the droplet or one puddle of blood will be much darker than the other part of the blood, which is the serum. And I've seen this demonstrated over and over and over again. Now, I don't know. Now, I do know that they had a team, Kohberger's team, that walked through the residence. Remember, the people in Idaho were trying to clean the place up. Yeah. And when he got hooked up on charges, they were like, whoa, Nelly, hold your horses here. As right they should have, okay? Right. We want our people to look through it before, let's take down the plastic tent that you got over the door that you're about to go in here and steam clean this place. All right.
Can we stop right there for just a minute? Because that is still, I'm telling you, Joseph Scott Morgan, the first trial I ever was that paid attention to on a day in, day out basis was in Raleigh, North Carolina, and it was Jeffrey McDonald, and it was nearly 10 years after the murder of his wife and two little girls, where he was convicted of murder. He claimed a group of hippies came in and did it, and they were able to, all these years removed, take the jury. Nearly 10 years after the murders, they were able to take the jury from that trial and take them to the crime scene, where they could walk in the room. They could see where the battle took place that McDonald claimed, where the fight happened. They actually saw where the wood was cut from the floorboard that had a footprint. They were the jury was able to see that. With what happened in Moscow, to this day, frustrates me to no end that they took the house down. Yeah. And because you cannot You cannot see it for what it is if it's no longer in existence. It's just in a 3D form on a computer.
Yeah.
And that bothered me then. It bothers me now. But you know what? Not just from the prosecution of the defense or any, it bothers me for the sake of, are we after justice? You know, if we're really after the truth, if we really want to make sure the right person pays for the crime, then we need to have all of the evidence possible. And that's a big piece of evidence you're getting rid of.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, it's the structure in which this took place. And for me, I always had a problem and talked about it extensively and, had my critics on that. There were a lot of people who said, well, it doesn't make any difference. They've documented everything. Really? You documented everything? Because I don't know. I mean, I saw problems in the beginning, and maybe I'll be proven wrong, going down the road. But back to this, the house is gone, obviously now. You talk about cleanup here and trying to contextualize that cleaned space that you're alleging. That's no more. So you're reliant. I wonder if this expert was part of that team that went through the house. I want to know if this individual was physically there. Was this a collection of attorneys and PIs, perhaps former police officers that were given access so that they could walk the house? Because, I got to tell you, with this particular expert that they have retained in this case, that would have been invaluable to them. And I think that everybody in this country deserves a defense, period, end of paragraph. You have to keep your emotions out of it because someday I might need a defense. Okay.
Yep.
You might need a defense, brother.
I've had one.
So, you want to be able to do this because if you don't do it, then, going back to an earlier, question that I had about appeals and all those things, raise their ugly head years and years later, and can be problematic. But look, this guy has put forth his opinion about the case. I know that there is a lot more data that is to be released relative to this case, or it's sitting there. The thing about it is you don't know when it's going to drop. It's kind of like everybody's, right now, they're just kind of in this posture like they're sitting on a spring. It's like, did you see the photo dump coming? I didn't see it coming. I didn't see the autopsy thing coming. And I didn't see the release of this gentleman's report, which, by the way, is not technically his full report. I kind of, giggled a little bit, you and I did, because air quotes, People magazine,
Yes.
People magazine, they say that it's sealed, but they have access to it,
Right.
And so do they just have access to a portion of it? I don't know. I never know what to believe when it comes to some type of media organization about what they do and do not have, because it's almost like playing poker. You can't, you never know, what's fact and what's fiction here. I'm hoping on one level that this is going to be put to rest for the sake of the families. I truly do, because they are literally all that's left behind. It doesn't matter how impassioned I am or anybody else out there, because, if you cloak yourself in the idea that you're just seeking justice here, according to the courts in Idaho, justice has been served. Now, we might not agree with how justice was served or how they went about it. And I'll say this in closing. I wish, out of everything that had occurred in this case, the one thing that I wish had occurred for my money was that Kohberger would have been compelled to allocute. You want to be spared. You want to be spared being strapped to a chair and shot as capital punishment is meted out. Here's the condition. you have to stand there and tell us what you did because you're pleading guilty. And I saw him plead guilty. I saw them go down that list and ask him one by one by one that, do you admit to this? Yes, guilty. But I think that some of these questions could have been answered if he had been compelled to allocute. Probably one of the biggest mistakes that was made along the way. But you know what? I submit to you that the press is happy he didn't allocute because they can continue to breathe life into the cases of these 4 young lives that were wiped out in November of 2022. I'm Joseph Scott Morgan, and this is Body Bags.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.